In this video, we're going to go over every single digestive disease, its symptoms, how it gets diagnosed, and what causes it. So here we have the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. Most commonly, we see people have ulcers here. It can be called stomach ulcers, duodenal ulcers, heartburn, acid reflux. It's this tissue going in and out of overdrive. Most of the ulcers are down here and actually not in the stomach. During the conflict active phase, it is cell loss, so it creates this burning pain. And then when the conflict gets resolved, it's a pressure pain. And it might also cause you to vomit as well. And the conflict for this, for men, is a territorial anger. And for women, it could be a territorial anger or an identity conflict. And you're kind of angry at somebody else for not allowing you to digest something important to your survival. This could also spread to the gallbladder. They're all very similar tissue right next to each other. So if you have green, yellow, bubbly, burning, stinky poops, this might mean your gallbladder is going in and out of overdrive, and it is the same conflict. There's really not much going on in this part of the small intestine, but in the ileum, we have a lot of issues that can happen. The first one being SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Now, when someone suffers a conflict shock of what is something important to my survival, I want to absorb, but I can't, and I'm angry and frustrated by it, the gut starts to develop extra gut cells to help you absorb this important thing to your survival. And then when it finally gets resolved, bacteria and fungi help remove these extra gut cells. Now, during the conflict active phase, there's no symptoms, and somebody might test high for dysbiosis, but they're only going to get symptoms when they resolve the conflict and this starts to get removed. So it's like blaming firefighters for starting the fire on your house where they're actually trying to fix things up. Candida is the same thing. Celiac disease is when someone reacts to gluten. But for the longest time, celiac was just a Greek word for the digestive system. And then in the 50s and then in the 80s, they started to use it to describe gluten intolerance, which doesn't make any sense. But essentially what gluten intolerance is, you suffered a traumatic event and somehow gluten was involved. The other day I saw a video of a guy eating a sandwich and he got arrested because he wasn't allowed to eat on the metro. I wouldn't be surprised if he developed some sort of an allergy to gluten. Now, Crohn's disease gets diagnosed when they find inflammation in the small intestine. SIBO gets diagnosed when they do a breath test. Candida gets diagnosed usually when they do a stool test. Crohn's and celiac get diagnosed usually, sometimes you can do it with a colonoscopy. You can get the camera up here far enough to see this, but a lot of the times you can't. So they got to look at it with an MRI or some sort of an X-ray machine. All it is your gut is going in and out of overdrive because there's something important to my survival. I cannot digest and absorb it. I'm angry and I'm frustrated about it. And if you're diarrhea, you're going to be usually angry and frustrated about it. But if you're constipated, it's, I want to hold on to it, but I can't. And I'm sad and depressed. I can't hold on to it. And that could switch back and forth, just depending on how you feel about the conflict that day. And remember, this is subconscious. The cure to most of these issues is bringing the conflict shock to consciousness. And I help people do that with my 13-day protocol. I take you through exercises to help you make these realizations. The conflict shock created a neural pathway. In order to get better, we need to change that neural pathway. So in my bio link, I have a free instant webinar that is a mini version of this. Leaky gut is another term where undigested food particles leak into the bloodstream and cause random symptoms. This is an incorrect theory. If I have a rash right here, it makes no sense that it was caused by leaky gut. You're telling me the toxins went all over my body, didn't cause any symptoms except for my rash? Or maybe it was I got attacked and someone grabbed me right here and I couldn't get away. That's the way we need to start looking at our symptoms. What was the traumatic event that put this body part in and out of overdrive? For the colon, it's what is crap I want to get rid of, but I can't. This absorbs food. This literally just holds crap. So colitis, same deal here. Cell proliferation to help us digest and absorb or get rid of this crap. And then when it gets resolved, it removes these extra cells, and that's when we get symptoms. And it keeps going on and on and on and on. It becomes chronic when we have lots of subconscious PTSD triggers that keep putting the gut in and out of overdrive, in and out of overdrive. Now, the symptoms for this can be gut pain or diarrhea or constipation or bloating. It's really hard to tell if you have Crohn's or colitis depending on your symptoms. Now, I know Crohn's is supposed to mean inflammation anywhere from mouth to butthole, but Dr. Burrell Crohn's wanted it to be called regional ileitis. And that's why it doesn't make, most things GI doctors do don't make any sense because they're like allergic to logic, apparently. But that's when most people get diagnosed, when they find inflammation here. Colitis, you just do a colonoscopy. They can really easily see that inflammation. Ulcerative colitis is when there's ulcers and bleeding. Diverticulitis is when pockets start to form. So it's the same thing as colitis. It's just been going on for a very long time. IBS is when they do all these tests and they can't find inflammation anywhere, yet you're still having symptoms. When that's happening, the intestinal muscles might be going in and out of overdrive. This is all lined with muscles. But a lot of the times I see that it's the gallbladder going in and out of overdrive due to that territorial anger or that identity conflict. And then we also have the perianal fistulas and the perianal abscesses. That's I can't mark my territory conflict. And then we also have the anal fissures and the hemorrhoids. And that's also going to be linked to a territorial anger or an identity conflict as well. I go over this in much more detail in my free webinar in my bio link. The way that I help people fix all these conditions is with my 13-day protocol.